how to test or screen people coming in the building appropriately. An earlier version of the CDC guidance obtained by the AP showed more detailed advice. It talked about putting in sneeze guards and no teacher lounges, staggering lunches. U.S. News and World Report found that the head of the nation's school superintendents organization gave some pretty blunt advice. Daniel Domenech says, quote, "Our recommendation to our members will be to follow that first report, official or not, because at least it gives pretty specific guidelines. The bottom line is that this new guidance is underwhelming." So we want to get specific. As individual schools and districts try to figure this out for themselves, how can they keep kids safe and teachers and staff? And then I wondered, what happens when one school or maybe just one classroom has to shut down? Are parents going to be allowed to stay home piecemeal? I got the perspective of Dr. Karen Aronian, who's an expert in education and parenting. Do we need to stagger days? Do some kids need to go, in fall, others in spring, some on Saturdays? Do we need to go that far?
Well, Chance, it depends upon where you're located and what the level of virus there is in that community at that time. All of the practical measures that you mentioned are possible. And along with those measures, we have ideas of perhaps changing people's shoes when they go into school. So they would come in a pair and then they would change out to a pair that they keep specifically in the school. And that would allow for, a cleaner school for sure and less germ tracking. In addition to that, we're going to need those infrared thermometer checks. That is a key consideration.
I don't need to tell you, because you're an expert in education, that some schools have more resources than others. And I'm thinking schools in urban settings and in rural settings. Do you think that parents would be able to advocate successfully to say, we need the same measures in our schools as, maybe those that are better equipped?
Certainly what you're pointing out is a key consideration. And I think that there are different ways in which schools might be able to advocate for themselves in order to get the funding they need to go forward with measures that safeguard their community. There are also the possibility, perhaps, of having schools let other schools utilize their teaching, per se, by streaming classes, algebra, history, perhaps, that would match up to another school's curriculum if they do not all have the same provisions of cameras or they're not able to stream. So we're definitely going to see some people reaching out and communicating to collaborate and, of course, advocate for the money they need to get kids back into school safely.
What happens when, because we put in these measures to keep some kids in classrooms separate, you have micro closures? One kindergarten classroom shuts down. Then the parents can't go to the employers and say, listen, the whole system is shut down. This is just what it is. I have to stay home. They might not get those same considerations. How does that work?
Yes, if a class was to shut down because those children had been exposed, that group of students would have to stay home. Those parents, dependent upon whether they could go back to work or could stay home, would have to outsource and create a different type of schooling environment at home. First off, we can count on these schools being up to speed at this point on some type of remote learning. Secondly, as I mentioned, you would hope that parents would be reaching out in advance and thinking about if they do have to go back to work, because 78% of our workforce is living paycheck to paycheck. They are going to need to have their aunts, their uncles, their families, their friends that they know have been doing correct social distancing measures, and have them come in and be that substitute teacher at that time. So if they are able to stay home for that period of time, and we do know through the CARES Act that there is at least a period of time where they will be covered financially to stay home, and if they haven't yet used that, or we have some more, care in that respect, we will have the ability for that parent to stay home with that child, vice versa.
Dr. Aronian, thank you.